All right. Hello, everyone. Hi, Matt.
Hey, how
Glad
are you?
to have you here.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We'll do a quick intro for everybody, but hello, welcome back to the Pre-Sales Unplugged, the Leadership Playbook. I'm Arvi. I'm the founder of Elite Talent. I work with SaaS companies to help hire pre and post sales talent, but today really isn't about me. This show is really about the leaders building go-to-market teams and strategies that actually work in today's market. If this is your first time joining us, one quick note before we jump in. These conversations are intentionally unedited. So what you hear here or what you hear here real is real and exactly how it happens. We stream live. You can also ask questions. We'll make sure to bring them up as the conversation's going. And of course, this will be posted on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, etc. afterwards, so you can catch the conversation as well there after the fact. So make sure to follow, subscribe, leave a review. I personally read every single one of them. With that being said, today I'm excited to be joined by Matt Green. He is the CRO and co founder of Sales Assembly. He has a very strong background in track record in this space specifically. And I'm super excited to have him here. Actually, I've been following his content for a very long time. He drops always really, really good knowledge, and I'm always taking notes too. And I just want to thank you for being here. I'm very excited to obviously have you here and just kind of dive into the topic for today.
No, thank you again for having me, and for all the listeners. Just want to set expectations accordingly. Yeah, I think that RV has been a little bit too generous in describing my background, but I'll see if I can live up to it today.
I think you're gonna blow everybody's expectations out the park.
I don't know. We'll see.
Awesome. Well, Matt, I'd love to obviously just give the audience a little bit of a background about you. If you want to tell us a little bit how your journey started, and of course, how did it lead to co-founding Sales Assembly, and what was the problem that you guys were trying to solve when you first launched it?
Yeah, it was kind of, I'll say that how we found ourselves here was through like this force gumping our way through our lives. So I've always been in some type of sales role, or at least sales adjacent role. Started my career in finance and wealth management, which there is a big sales component because you're going out and selling yourself, trying to convince people to give you their money to manage as opposed to someone else or managing it themselves. Did that for about a decade and a half. Somehow found my way working with a early stage tech startup here in Chicago. One of the first people that I had hired onto my team at that time, once I joined that tech startup, was my now business partner, Jeff Rossett, who's our CEO. And as we were working there in sales leadership roles, we had decided to build just a really informal monthly coffee meeting with the heads of sales of what at the time were other early stage tech companies here in Chicago, companies like G2 and Sprout Social and Spot Hero, so on and so forth. And we would all come together every month and just chat about what we're working on, what we're struggling with, what we're seeing out there in the market. And it didn't take us long to realize that all of these leaders, they were all working for different companies, they were selling different products to different people, but they were always complaining about the exact same stuff, right? So we just started saying like, hey, why don't we start offering solutions to some of these things you keep complaining about, which tended to revolve around bandwidth or lack thereof for the training and development of their AEs, their BDRs, their CSMs. That eventually became what Sales Assembly is today. So we've been doing this for about 8.5 years. And what we do today is we provide all the day-to-day skills training for the go-to-market teams of a few hundred B2B tech companies across the ecosystem.
Love that. Yeah, I found that SaaS founders typically will obviously be in a problem themselves that they're looking to solve, or just hear the same thing as you just said over and over again, and obviously try to solve that problem, not just for yourself, but also other people as well. So I love hearing stories of how companies got founded overall. What I'd love to do, Matt, is kind of go like high level strategy and then kind of trickle down to like really specific and tactics from here. So I'd love to ask you, as a obviously CRO and co-founder of the company, how do you balance high level like go-to-market strategy with still trying to stay close to what's actually happening on the front lines?
Ooh, interesting question. It is, for the lack of a better term, we do have a little bit of a cheat code here at Sales Assembly because we are a small company. We're bootstrapped, and although my title is CRO, I'm still the one and only salesperson, right? So by default, I do have to remain close to the ground, so to speak, because absent that, no more sales come in.
Yeah.
But at the same time, simultaneously, I do have to worry about, like you said, these bigger picture, more strategic items, such as building a business in general and more relevant to the conversation today and to the traditional CRO role. Having my hand in all things sales, go to market strategy, marketing, post sales, customer success, retention, et cetera, et cetera. So, long winded way of answering your question. How do I balance it? Really have no other choice, just given the size of our company and what we do.
Yeah. No, I love that, and I think even as you grow, at least that's my personal opinion, please feel free to correct me on this. As you grow, it's always good to have kinda like one foot into the front lines. Of course, staying close to the team and your responsibilities grow and all that good stuff, and you probably at that point, you'll have managers and directors in place. But I feel like nothing can really replace being in front of the customer. It really makes you see things differently, and typically, I like to say, like, because 'cause I'm a founder myself, obviously not in SaaS, different industry, but, typically, I like to say that the way you view things as a founder, as you're talking to customers, is different than, actual, team members or, the salesperson looking at it, because you're looking at it from the bigger lens versus obviously their job is to just focus on getting that sale across. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, no, I would completely agree. I do think that that is a big mistake that a lot of founders have made over the years is, once, they raise a series A or series B, they build a go-to-market team. It's like, great, I'm stepping back. I'm just going to be the CEO and I'm not going to spend any of my time, really
Yeah,
interacting with customers or prospects because I have a team to do that now, which on the one hand is valid, but on the other hand, to your point, you lose all of that, just sort of organic market research, for the lack of a
yeah,
better term, to help inform your product, your strategy, and everything else that you're trying to build in your
yeah.
business.
I'll play devil's advocate here for a second and just say, like, what if you just listen to, like, call recordings, and try to kind of check in after the fact? Do you think that's still the same thing? Or and it could be. I'm just obviously looking for your opinion on that too.
Yeah, I think it's if you ever have Xerox something, then made a Xerox copy of that Xerox, then a Xerox copy of that Xerox, right? So it's like 3 or 4 steps removed. I think that's what you get from just listening to call recordings, right? Because the
Yeah,
opportunity that you miss, if you are a prospect or a customer and I'm listening to a recording of you talking with someone on my team, the opportunity that I don't have is to say like, "Hey, RV, let's pause right there. Could we talk more about this?" Right? Or like, "Oh crap,
yeah,
I really wish that she went into more detail about X, Y, Z," or "I really wish I had the opportunity to ask her this pointed question." It's
yeah,
missing those, what might seem like small opportunities, but when you bundle all of them together equals one large
yeah.
opportunity that tends to fall by the wayside.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say as a founder, and obviously in your spot too, it's it's really hard to not wanna jump in sometimes and fix
Yeah.
your team's mistakes, but, at the end of the day, they also need to learn one way or another. So it's always about balancing both. It's like, when do you jump in versus, okay, when do we let them, in a way, have a mistake and then try to fix it for next time?
Yeah.
So it's really cool. I'd love to say this. So obviously, you told me that you're meeting with CROs and VPs of sales pretty often. You mentioned like a coffee type environment per se. So you're in a very unique spot, talking to hundreds of these B2B tech CROs and VP of sales every month. What is like one trend or challenge that you're hearing across the board right now?
Yeah, across the board, and I'm sure that you and probably some of the folks listening have seen this coming a mile away. All things AI, right? I mean, it is still causing a lot of confusion, a lot of nervousness, and I think that's due in large part to the rate at which all things AI are constantly changing. So
Yeah,
it's creating this environment where every go-to-market leader that they know I need to find more and more ways to build AI into our go to market function. They know it because they see their peers doing it. They know it because their board is giving them pressure to do it. And they know it just through their own research. They're like, hey, this is a good idea. What do they do? How do they do it? All open questions that people are trying to figure out. And again, especially given the rate at which everything is changing, about a year ago, that we were involved in a lot of conversations where we would overhear leaders that have bought, really cool, exciting point solutions, AI point solutions that have come to market. You fast forward a couple quarters, it's like, well, no, those AI point solutions, they've been acquired, they've pivoted, they've gone out of business. Add on top of that, it's like, well, crap. I mean, now we have the ability to build a lot of this stuff internally as opposed to just buying point solutions to solve this problem. So again, it's this constant moving target that is creating a lot of confusion as far as what leaders should or should not be doing, how they should build or not build things. And then layered on top of all of this is the erroneous concern that they're the only ones that don't have everything figured out. And
Yeah.
that couldn't be further from the truth. I mean, no one, with few exceptions, no one really knows everything that they're doing as it relates to AI and go to
Yeah.
market and the intersection thereof. But if you are a VP of sales or CRO at a Series C SaaS company, you're pulling up LinkedIn, you're reading articles, you're looking out the market. It's like, crap, it seems like everyone has this figured out except me. Couldn't be further from the truth.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I love that. I think everybody obviously is trying to do their best,
Yeah.
and then social media, of course, can be very deceiving. Um, do you mind giving us a little bit of an insider's, like, peek as to, like obviously, you're having these conversations with everybody. What are they deciding? What are they, testing that's working or maybe that's not working that, of course, you're allowed to share?
Yeah, yeah. What has been working has again, there has been the shift towards, or I should say, away from buying more tools to building more
Mm,
things internally, right? That
mhm.
has been a big shift over the past couple quarters.
Yeah.
But I think that the organizations that we see implementing AI extremely efficiently, they focused, at least to start, on solving very small tactical problems as opposed to looking at this like, hey, here's a big picture problem that we're going to try to solve in air quotes with AI. So, for example, one of the companies that we work with and the leader there, he's very AI forward. They A big part of their go-to-market motion, how they have success, is in-person events, trade shows, conferences, things like that. They built a really useful workflow where if you're taking part in a trade show or a conference, you know that by default, you're maybe getting the attendee list 24 to 48 hours before the event, right? And of course, if you're spending all this money to be there, it's like, okay, well,
Yeah.
we got to set up meetings with these people. And historically, it would take a decent amount of time. So like, okay, well, we got to go through the list. We got to remove all the clients or people that we're already in conversations with. And then we have to have the SDRs create messaging to send out to them to try to book the meetings. And, at the end of the day, those messages to book those meetings would go out again, hours before the event takes place. Without going into too much detail, through a combination of Clay and Zapier and some other workflows, this leader was able to build this end-to-end system where the moment that they get an attendee list for a conference or a trade show, Clay goes to work, identifying ICP, deduping anyone that's in the CRM, and then automatically sending out personalized messages, ostensibly from the from the SDR, saying like, "Hey, our VP of Sales is going to be there. Why don't we take a look at finding 15 minutes for the two of you to meet?" Their meeting rate just has gone through the roof, mainly just because they are first in these prospects' inboxes once they get that attendee list, right? So that's just one, using that as a microcosm, just one example of like, hey, we have this small problem. How do we book more
Yeah.
meetings for trade shows? And then finding a thoughtful way to have AI solve that one small problem, as opposed to some leaders that have said, we're struggling with top of funnel. How do we use AI to solve top of funnel?
Yeah, that's very cool. And you mentioned a big push for in-person selling again. One, why do you think that shift is happening? And two, how are the best go-to-market teams approaching it right now?
Yeah, I think that outside of that company that I mentioned, this shift is happening across the board. For any unless you're a very transactional sale, I mean, even in a mid-market sales type of environment, we do see more
Yeah,
and more leaders making a big push towards getting their teams meeting with prospects and clients in person. It seems to be the only way for sales teams to break through the AI generated
the no's,
noise,
yeah.
emails and phone calls. Yeah, so they're, of course, that they're spending money on conferences and trade shows as they've always done, but there's also this big push towards micro events, small events around these trade shows, small events around these conferences. And we do see a lot of organizations, especially if they're selling it into the enterprise, finding ways to leverage in-person meetings as part of the sales process, not
Mhm.
only to give them a leg up on their competitors, but also what I find interesting as a really strategic way to pressure test the health of an opportunity, right? Because if you've been working on this big deal for 5, 6, 7, 8
Yeah,
months, and you feel like, okay, well, yeah, I think that we're getting close to the finish line. Maybe I'm forecasting it to close next quarter, and you reach out to your champion there and you say like, hey, I'm going to be in Boston 2 weeks from now. Kind of drop by
yeah.
the office. Maybe take you and the team out to coffee. And if they say no to that, it's like, okay,
Mhm.
is this opportunity as healthy as I thought it was just a few days ago? Right. So using those in-person opportunities again as a way to sort of pressure test the viability of an op is something that I think that's really cool that we see a lot of leaders doing right now.
Yeah, very, very interesting. So, to recap slightly what you said, obviously they're leveraging in-person events, conferences, or another avenue is micro events. Or do you mean micro events? Is this like the company is organizing it to bring their prospective customers in, or is it micro events that they're maybe joining in of like what's happening locally or something like that?
Yeah, good question. A little bit of both, more of the
Yeah,
former, right? So as opposed to like, hey, we're going to spend six figures on this booth at this trade show. Let's
yeah,
go to the same city. Let's go to Vegas. Let's go to San Francisco, whatever the case may be, and create these really cool small experiences, invite a curated crowd that we know are going to be at this event and try to get in front of folks that way. So, version
yeah.
of guerrilla marketing, if you might want to call it that.
Okay, very cool. And then on the in-person side, you mentioned ideally you're looking to go in person, obviously not at the beginning of that conversation, but towards the end, right? Do you see a difference, or maybe you haven't, maybe you guys haven't tested it yet in terms of like, should we test going in the front end of that conversation or the back end? Do you think the front end might make a difference versus not?
Yeah, there's definitely value on both of those approaches, right? So,
Hmm.
meeting a prospect at a trade show, at a conference, that's always, I think, going to give you a leg up, at least
Yeah,
during the early stages of the sales process. But yeah, and we see this in our own business. We do a lot of in-person events every year, and I've lost count of the number of opportunities that working on then they kind of fall by the wayside. But then it's like, hey, we're going to be in Austin, we're going to be in Denver, we're going to be in Boston doing a dinner. Let's get you in the room. Just meeting them in person has more often than not tended to sort of restart those
yeah,
conversations. You know the deal. It's like, oh yeah, yeah, Matt, I've been meaning to get back to you. And, hey, thanks for
yeah.
good to build a relationship. Then it tends to actually move forward from there. That's just human nature. But yeah, we do
Of
see
course.
that pretty often on our end.
Yeah, love that. Thank you for explaining it and kind of diving a little bit more in depth on that end. Obviously, creative top of funnel is a very hot topic, using AI versus not using, like you said, going to trade shows, etc. Is there any strategies that are working more right now that are driving pipeline or qualified pipeline?
Yeah, the outside of in person, I would say gifting, but
Okay.
the nuance there would be more creative and personalized gifting than maybe some folks were doing a year or 2 years ago. Where it's like, hey, let's send some swag, let's send a Starbucks gift card, to take a meeting with me.
Yeah.
I heard a story recently which I thought was really cool. Again, companies selling in, I think it was, six-figure opportunity, rather than, and this was initially to get the initial meeting with someone in the executive leadership team. So this was very early on in the sales process, rather than just sending, like a fruit basket or whatever.
Yeah.
They leverage AI to do a lot of research on this individual, not only their professional background, but their personal background. At the end of the day, they found out, like, hey, big baseball fan, who's, their favorite baseball player, and, like all these different personal signals. And then what they had created was a baseball bat engraved with, that person's name. And they
Yeah.
somehow, found, one of these bats that does have, like, their favorite player's signature on it. They just sent them that bat, right?
Very cool.
And of course, they're notified when it's delivered. Their sales rep follows up the very next day, like, hey, it's to see if you got this really cool thing that we sent you. We do see a lot of teams that are killing it with that type of very bespoke, very creative type of gifting strategy, because
Yeah.
just like the in-person events, it allows you to break through all the noise.
Nice. Yeah, I love that. Definitely very unique. I'm gonna drift a little bit here to the post that I think you made either yesterday that I commented on or this morning, I forgot, where you talked about starting a new territory. And correct me if I'm wrong here. You talked about 2 to 3 steps of like what is the most effective way, especially if you have a new sales rep in your organization, of how you think they should approach starting a new territory. And I would love for you to just recap those steps for us because I think that they can apply not only to SaaS but honestly any industry. So I thought that that was very cool, very important on the steps that you did it, and I personally agreed with it too. So I'd love for our listeners to have a chance, if they didn't read it yet, to hear it from you as well.
No, thanks for saying that. Yeah, I mean, the whole thesis behind that post was, you're assigned a new territory, you're a new rep. It's like, crap, I'm starting from zero. I got no pipeline. I got to start digging into activity. I got to start emailing, calling, and just, building my book, building some pipeline, which is understandable. Yeah, my recommendation was to take a slightly more thoughtful approach. That, again, 2 steps before the outreach. Number one, you have to get a good sense of the market itself, right? Who
Mhm.
are the players, so to speak? Who are the VCs that are funding the organizations? Who are the accountants that are doing, that are running the books, so to speak, for these companies? What associations are they a part of? Just get a good lay of the land, because depending on what territory you're working on, that there is a whole lot of value in just thinking hyper local, right? How do
Mhm.
people that live in this area, in this specific town, in this specific city, how do they do business? Who do they interact with? Getting your head around that and start building those relationships with those different nodes across that ecosystem, across that territory, would be number one. And then once you have that established, rather than just focusing on activity, you got to be able to find a way to leverage some of the existing relationships that either you, or probably more relevant, your organization already has, and in some way, shape, or form are tangentially related to that territory. So I'm talking about leveraging existing logos, finding areas of opportunity for introductions into prospects in that specific market, right? I'm talking about leveraging partners, right? Getting a good sense of the partner ecosystem that might exist that could help you drive some introductions into folks in that market, right? So
Yeah.
again, it was just sort of ignoring the, again, completely understandable reaction. Say like, okay, I'm starting from zero. I got this $1 million quota. Go, 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 go. I got to start generating some activity. So like, okay, well, if we're going to be active, let's do it thoughtfully to make sure that we're measuring twice and cutting once, so to
Yeah.
speak.
Yeah, I love that. Is there a tech stack that you recommend, obviously for doing all of these activities and, just keeping it simple, right? I think we're overwhelmed, of course, by the amount of products and tools that are out there that you could add on. What would be like your go-to tech stack of like, of course, whatever you want to share on that end, but that you would recommend at least everybody has?
Yeah, I think, a lot of this, fortunately, in this day and age, a lot of that, especially step number one, just that general research, can be
Mhm.
done through pick your AI tool, right? Whether it's ChatGPT, Claude, or Perplexity, any
Yep.
of those, just build some really thoughtful prompts and let that do the work for you. Just again, to sort of hit the fast forward button. On leveraging relationships, sure, you could absolutely use LinkedIn, Sales Navigator. That being said, there are some tools that we have some direct experience with, tools like Org or tools like View, that they're just built around this concept of warm introductions, right? So if I'm breaking into the Texas market, I'm going to be able to pull up one of these platforms. I'm going to be able to say like, okay, well, I know RV. Who does RV actually know? And not just connections like LinkedIn, like, hey, who's she connected to, but who does she actually know?
Yeah.
Right? And what these platforms will do, which is really cool, is pull in not only your work history, geographic history, but also social signals, right? So these tools can tell me, hey, RV is connected to this person. Not only are they connected, they worked together for 3 years, they worked in the same department, they worked in the same city, and I see that they are interacting on social media. So that when I reach out to RV and I say, hey, do you know this person? Chances are she's going to say not only yes, but yes, I know them well enough and I'm willing to make an introduction to you.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I wanted to go over that because I think sometimes that, we overcomplicate the amount of tools that we need or what we should use to get in front of these people. And like you said, we're very fortunate nowadays where you can just go into one of your AI tool of choice, get as much info as you can, then plug in, a second or third tool, and then you're done. And then you can move on from there versus having like, oh, I need this for this. And then like five tech stack later, you're just like, I don't even know what's happening anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Analysis paralysis is a real thing, especially with all the
For
different
sure.
tools available.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. From your seat, what would you say are like your biggest gaps that you see between sales and marketing alignment that still exist today? And, who should be owning that bridge?
Yeah. Who should be owning that bridge? I think both, it's a cop out answer. I think both of them, right? I mean,
Yeah.
and I know that depending on who you talk, it's like, oh, well, sales should take this and marketing should take
Yeah.
this. I mean, and it kills me to an extent that we still see this across the ecosystem because we've been talking about this for a decade now, sales and marketing alignment, yet we're still in this place where a lot of organizations, um, that there's still friction might be too strong of a word, but let's call it misalignment
Yeah.
between the two. So yeah, unfortunately, those gaps still exist, especially in growth stage companies where maybe you have a director or VP of sales on the sales side, but then on the marketing side you have a much more senior CMO, right? And the two of them, that they might not exactly speak the same language because they don't have the same level of experience. And fair or not, that kind of stuff happens where the CMO might come in and is like, no, it's just I know what I'm doing. Look at the job title, look at the business card. Mr. and
Yeah.
Mrs. VP of sales, just kind of follow my lead here. And of course, the reverse could happen as well. If you have like a CRO, then like a director of marketing or VP of
Yeah.
marketing. So, but again, a lot of that, I think, and again, cop out answer, a lot of that can be solved just by collaboration and conversation and shared ownership of the goals, setting up the comp plans appropriately on both sides.
Yep.
I was just having a conversation last week with the CMO of an organization, and they're driving some like 90% of the new business pipeline, and a little bit of frustration because like, hey, the AEs aren't really contributing to the pipeline goal. They're just taking what we send them, which for now is great, but that's not going to scale, right? As we go
Yeah.
from 50 to 100 to 150 million, that's when you start getting into the conversation where like, okay, well, is it worth changing the comp plan for the
Hmm.
AEs? Pay them more on self-source deals or remove them from inbound opportunities unless they're hitting some activity metrics that at least show that they're trying to
Yeah.
self-source their own pipeline, right? There are those conversations that can be had if you did want to sort of force the issue of alignment to make sure that people are sort of playing on the same team.
Yeah, very true. I like to joke around and say that sales and marketing are like siblings. They love each other. They can't survive without each other in a way, and obviously they hate each other at times. They're always trying to blame, "No, you did this. No, you did
Yep.
that."
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't think your answer is really a cop out. I mean, the right answer is both of them own
Mhm.
it, and at the end of the day, they're both trying to go towards the same goal. But it's, obviously, like I said, like that sibling relationship of like, oh, I did my job and now it's time to do yours, etc. So
Yeah.
yeah, I love how you explained that. Um, I I wanted to ask if you were advising a new CRO stepping into their first role, what is maybe one thing you'd tell them to stop doing, and then one thing that you should tell them to double down on?
Um, yeah, the first thing I tell them is, find another advisor outside of me, but presuming that I did that, and then they said, "Well, no, Matt, I still want your opinion anyway."
Yeah,
If they're just stepping into a new organization, I would encourage them, and it goes back to the territory planning that we were talking about a moment ago. Let's just walk slow at the beginning, right?
yeah,
CROs or any leader, when they come into a new organization, they do have a propensity to be like, okay, I'm here, new paradigm, got to make some big changes. I'm going to change, the methodology, the sale. I'm going to bring in MedPick and comp plan changes. And no, hey, I'm going to bring in some folks that I've worked with before, which again, understandable. But I would encourage them to again, maybe spend the first 30, 60 days just sort of listening, for the lack of a better term, and getting a really good lay of the land before you start making some of these changes. Because, and I know it sounds like no duh when you say it, but we do see a lot of leaders still making this mistake. Just
mhm,
because this process or this methodology or this motion worked for you when you were a leader at Oracle does not mean it's going to translate well
exactly.
to the Series C or Series D tech
Yeah,
company, right? So I would say, that would be the one thing I'd caution against, moving too fast. The one thing that I would advise them to probably do more of, and it ties back into something we were speaking about earlier with respect to founders, is you got to get close to the customer, right? And a lot of leaders, they will admittedly spend time getting close to the team, and like I said, think that that gives them enough, of the insight into the customer. But there's no substitute for the actual face-to-face and air
yeah,
quotes conversations that you could have with customers and prospects. Spending more time on that as you're getting that lay of the land.
yeah. I love that answer, and I was actually hoping you were gonna say that, especially of them, kind of sitting not in the sidelines per se in the first 30 to 60 days, but just really getting an understanding of how the whole organization works before they go in and make changes. I did wanna play devil's advocate here and say, what if they're getting pressure from above in terms of results, right? Like, if they're like, "Hey, I need you to step in and make changes in the first 30 days, it's really bad," whatever that looks like. How would you advise it in those types of scenarios?
Yeah, this that's an interesting question. We do see that a lot, and again, might sound like a cop out answer. Did you select the the right role, the right opportunity, right?
Yeah,
Because and again, we see this a lot in the space where a new CRO comes in, it's like, crap, I got 90 days to start moving the needle, or else I'm going to be out of a job, right? It's like, okay, well, is that the right opportunity for you? Is that
opportunity.
even
Mhm.
realistic, right? To,
Yeah,
to make such meaningful changes during the first two quarters, right? I do think it's important to show progress, but I don't think that you can have meaningful progress unless you've actually done your due diligence. And there's only so much research and insight you could gather from the outside, right? And you could go through the interview process, you could talk for 6, 9, 12 months, talk to the board, talk to the CEO, have all these conversations. There still are going to be gaps that exist that are not going to be filled until you're actually on the team day to day, talking with all the reps, swimming in it, right?
yeah.
So again, cop out answer, but my response to that would be get in the DeLorean, go back in time,
Good time.
set expectations with the board. Like, hey, this isn't
Yeah,
going to be like a 90-day thing, and then like everything's working like gangbusters. this is going to take a little bit more time to turn the ship around.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is where the hiring process comes in place, right? As
Yeah.
somebody coming into the organization, and you're going through, ideally at this stage, C-level and VP are up really should be a very, very thorough interview where there should be transparency on both sides before you even start the role, right? Like here is every challenge that we're dealing with in an organization. We want you to come in and fix this. Then the CRO would be like, okay, great. What's my timeline for coming in, right? I'm coming in fixing whatever 10 biggest challenges right now. How do we want to prioritize them? Are you wanting me to get all of these done the first 90 days? So I think, like you said, it's very important, before you even go there to avoid this entire problem. Ask the right questions, make sure you're really making the right decision stepping in and just taking your time in the interview process. I think that also speaks to your personal experience and your expertise coming into the role. And even if that founder or owner hasn't really thought about those questions yet, you bringing that up, it's like, okay, this guy knows what he's, or this woman knows what they're doing, and they're bringing in the right expertise. So we should stop and take a step back and think through before we set these hardcore deadlines.
Yeah, and it might, I might be biased just with my own direct experience, but the handful of CROs or other executive level leaders that I know that I respect that are doing a really phenomenal job at their organizations. The one thread of connectivity between all of them is, they were having conversations with these companies that they joined for 6, 9, 12, sometimes 18 months before
Yeah.
actually taking the plunge. And I understand that for a lot of people, that's not necessarily realistic. But I do think that there is something to infer there. Again, just to your point, with the amount of time to make sure, like, okay, not only is this going to be the right fit culturally, but we're all aligned as far as what I'm going to be doing and how I'm going to be doing it once I get in
Yeah, yeah. Actually, you brought up a really interesting point. I wasn't really going to touch on this, but since you brought it up, do you think there's like let's just say VP and above, C-level suite, do you think there's like a sweet spot in terms of interview process, or even if, like you said, some companies might not have the ability to drag that out for 18 months
there.
in terms of an interview process to really make sure it's the right person? Do you feel like there's a sweet spot of like what that looks like for hiring, obviously these key roles?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I'd actually defer back to you. I mean, this is what you do
Yeah.
every day. I mean, you'd have much more domain expertise on this than I would. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, for sure. So I think at a minimum, you're looking at a five-step interview process and then a couple of key things, depending how you want to organize them within that interview process. Is one, making sure obviously you're really aligned on vision and strategy, like we just recently talked about with the CEOs, whoever is you're going to be working most closely with. Two
Mm,
is making sure you're meeting with the team, talking to them about challenges. What are they liking? What are they not liking? What are things they want to see change versus not? And most importantly, what are they looking from in the person coming in and stepping into that position as they're, making all these changes, et cetera? What kind of leader do they want?
mm,
Um, Obviously, culture, huge thing on that end is understanding, is this the right company for me? Do I align with their vision? Do I understand and agree with where they're going? Is it aligned with my career choices as well in terms of where I'm trying to go? And then, of course, from there is just aligning back with the CEO or your C-level suite at that point, and just really having I call it a working interview. Everybody does it differently, but doing like a day of work in this type of environment, especially with these key roles like VP and above. It's more than just like, oh, I'm going to come in for like 2 hours and do a presentation and really see what they're. This is knowing somebody at a personal core level. You're going to work. If you were hiring for a VP level right now, you're going to be working with that person profoundly and extremely close. So first, do I like Matt? Do I like how I interact with him personally? And then, of course, on a business level. So culture comes down to both things.
yeah.
But and then from there, of course, everything it's company dependent, I will say. But at least hitting those 4 to 5 key points, I would say it's the most important part of the entire hiring process, especially for a key role like this.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's right on target. I mean, across the board. And
Yeah,
especially, and it sounds, might sound silly, but just liking someone personally. I mean, sure, I
yeah,
mean, you can respect someone professionally, but if you wake up every morning, it's like, shit, I got to deal with Matt again.
yeah,
Or,
yeah,
like even if he's doing well, like, everything's moving well, but crap, I just can't stand being in a meeting with the
yeah.
guy. But there is something there. It's like, oh, is this worth it? I mean, is it worth spending 40, 60, 80 hours of your week having to interact with someone? It's like,
Somebody.
man, I can't stand this.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll say this in terms of culture, there's two main aspects to culture that I like to define them as. You have your professional like culture and core values, and then you have your personal culture and core values. They don't necessarily have to mix, especially as a founder. But if you're coming in and like you said, you are working with Matt 60 hours a week and you
Mm.
cannot stand his personal core values, the way he is as a person, the way he communicates, how he talks to people, how he talks to you, it's just, I mean, it's the wrong company for you. There is a right
Which, by
person
the
for
way,
Matt.
yeah, which, by the way, most people can't. Just so you know, I mean, that is the feedback that I hear from people that interact with me. It's like, I can't deal with you anymore. So that
I
tracks.
think that's on a positive level,
Yeah,
because you're
I doubt that.
really honing in, being too direct, and telling them what they don't want to hear, but they know they need to hear it.
Yeah, I doubt that, but thank you for the generosity.
Oh, for sure. With that being said, how do you personally define top talent for your team? Is there anything that people can do right now to you to stand out, or just leaders in general from what you've heard in conversations with other leaders with with all the changes that we've seen recently?
Yeah, I think there's a term that I use, and again, a lot of it is a byproduct of us being in this scrappy, bootstrap type of environment. But I think that this is applicable across the board, regardless of the role that you're interviewing for. If you are an individual contributor, frontline man, whatever the case may be, figure it out of this. It is the term
Huge.
that I use. Just the ability to take initiative and get shit done without needing to rely on too much guidance. I mean, my very first job professionally, our our boss at the time, he would hand out it, is ostensibly a book. It's more like a booklet. It's 3 or 4 pages. He would hand out to every single new hire this book called Message to Garcia. And
Mhm.
the whole the theme of the book, the story, it's, I think, during the Spanish American War, and the story is, a general, he has to get a message to Garcia. So he pulls, one of the soldiers aside, and he said, here, here, get this message to Garcia. And what does that soldier not do? He does not say, who's Garcia? He does not say, well, that's not my job. He does not say, how am I supposed to do that? He just
Yeah.
says, on it, and he
Have it.
figures it out. And every new hire that we make here at Sales Assembly, I give them that exact same sort of like, this is what we need. This is the environment in which we're operating in. And whether, again, you're joining a small company like ours or a big publicly traded company, I think every leader is going to respect and value that level of figure it out ofness, so to speak, if you're going to be able to bring it to the table.
Yeah, I love that. I'm gonna have to copy that from now on.
Please, yeah, it's all yours.
I'll give you credit though, for sure. I love to end with this, Matt. Obviously, you have really grown your personal LinkedIn presence, your branding, of course. Do you think that that's something that is person dependent? Like you should do it if this, or is it something that nowadays, either as a leader or a founder, that it's like non-negotiable that everybody should be doing it?
I personally think it's helpful. I mean, of course, I'm extremely biased because we do invest a lot of time and thoughtfulness into doing so. Mainly because selfishly, it's been an amazing marketing channel for us. But yeah, I mean, I just think that in general, anywhere that you can go where your buyers learn stuff and we sell to revenue leaders of B2B tech companies, those leaders just tend to learn stuff on LinkedIn, right? More than any other platform, at least as far as I know. So
Yeah.
I think just being part of being involved in those conversations and trying to add value to the extent that you can, and just focusing on that, not focusing on selling, but just trying to like, hey, here's
Just
something that I think is valuable. Here's my perspective on XYZ. If it resonates with your buyer, they're going to be more inclined to reach out to you, right? When they're evaluating, so like, hey, I've been following this Mac guy on LinkedIn. We need skills training for our team. Rightly or wrongly, Matt seems to know what he's talking about. I mean,
yeah.
that is a big value, and that will translate, I think, to pretty much any product and any buyer that you're trying to sell to. So I am a big believer in it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more because obviously I do the same thing on my end.
Yeah,
And I think it just for anybody that is not sure on how to get started, we I think overthink sometimes because usually it's just the first step, right? Like once you
yeah,
get that first step and you start getting some likes and you start feeling good about yourself and you're like, what, people like what I have to say, then it gives you that motivation to keep going.
yeah,
But in terms of the first step, kind of exactly what Matt said is just steer from your personal experiences, what's happening to you personally. You might think it's boring or it's like, why would anybody want to hear this? But as obviously you've seen Matt's success on your own. I have too. People do want to hear it and people do care about your opinion. And they will value it.
yeah. Hopefully, yeah.
You're very modest, but, Matt, where can everybody follow you and your amazing posts that are so tactical and so valuable? Where can they do that?
Yeah, no, I appreciate you saying that. If you're dumb enough to want to hear my nonsense, yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. You could look at my profile there. Sales Assembly, our website is salesassembly.com. But yeah, I mean, anyone that's interested in just connecting and having a conversation about anything in general would love to connect with them. So yeah, the more conversations, the merrier.
Absolutely, and it's Matt Green on LinkedIn, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Matt, for sharing all of this and honestly just being super transparent. There was so much value. This was so good. Thank you again for joining and sharing your insight. If you guys have not been taking notes so far, make sure to go back and listen to the recording because this was definitely a lot of value. For those of you watching live or catching the replay, please feel free to connect with Matt Green on LinkedIn, and drop questions after the fact. We always keep an eye on them and we'll answer them afterwards too. But thank you again, Matt. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and I'll see you all next time.
Thanks for having me.